Welcome to the Jam Yearbook. I'm Jim.
And I'm Matt. Welcome to the new format based on the old format.
Hey.
If you listened to the previous episode, our mid-year wrap-up, you would have heard we've put the show on reverse.
Yeah, new music's always going to be part of our lives, but we know that nostalgia was in the driver's seat of this show for more than 2 years. Matt, we stumbled a little bit and we spent the last 6 to 9 months always on the hunt for new music, but we're kind of tapping out on that now. I think we've grown a little weary of always looking for something new, and we have found more enjoyment in kind of exploring music that's coming year by year. So we changed this up to be about album anniversaries, and we're going to go 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and that's as far as we can go back because it's still within the years of our lives. So I think we should just jump right into it and let's start talking about the music, don't you think?
Yeah, let's go all the way back. 25 years. 1999. I think the first one we got to talk about is Red Hot Chili Peppers, Californication.
Okay. This is going to make people feel old when they hear some of these albums. Yes, Californication is 25 years old. And you and I, we're probably going to have a fist fight over this album.
Yeah, but maybe we'll come to an agreement over certain things about it. I was so over the Peppers by the time this came out, and our old pal the radio put the final nails in that coffin for me. I could turn on literally like 4 local radio stations and hear songs off this. You couldn't escape it.
I'm sure there's been a dozen times a song off this album's been played today on local radio in your area.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it hasn't gone away. That's kind of what makes it annoying, and it's not the Chili Peppers' fault.
It isn't. I did like the songs Other Side and Parallel Universe. They're a couple of my favorite Chili Pepper tunes, but I could probably do without most of this album. What makes their album so long? Scar Tissue is boring, and the title track for me just kind of drags. And Around the World, let's not forget the inspirational lyrics. Ding, 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 dong, ding, 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 dong, ding, ding.
You made me cringe. I got PTSD. I think it's because Tony writes so many fantastic lyrics. It'll be considered, it's going to be like a crime against humanity if they don't use them. He's economical too. I'll give him this. All right. he knows, man, I gotta write, 15, 18 songs worth of lyrics. So how can I do that? Oh, you know what? California, there's a lot of syllables there. I'm going to try to pump that word into as many songs as I fucking can. But yeah, write what you know.
Yeah.
And kidding aside, this is a good question, because does anybody need to put 15 songs on an album? I mean, back in the day, you had a double album, right?
Yeah.
And those were even then bloated. In Californication, it's not all bad, but there's a ton of fat that could have been trimmed. The middle part of that album has some really good tunes that maybe if they put more time into those, this could be a really good Chili Peppers album. Remember way back when we were doing the original format of the show, and we were pointing out that in the 70s and early 80s, bands would put out 2 albums in a year, sometimes even 3. It's rare, but it would happen. It's because they had like 8 songs, not 15. If you put 8 to 10 songs on an album, how many do you think are going to get played live? For a band that's got a 5 album back catalog, how many of these songs see the light of day, not just on somebody's playlist, but get played live? What are you going to hear live? You're just going to hear the hits, man. Jukebox time. Play what's going to make people shake their ass. If they were taking requests and I yelled, I like Dirt, play that, would they even be able to do it? And that's a shame, because it's a good song that they put work into record it. A lot of people put work into that. Or we can just blame Rick Rubin for everything again.
Yeah, we can blame Rick Rubin, that's for sure. Even a couple of years ago, they put out 2 albums in the same year, and each of those albums could have been double albums. So I think these are guys who just think that we want to listen to every single thing they write. And if you're a hardcore fan, you love that. But some of this stuff should be B-side material that you have to go hunt for and find and make it fun for the fan. and then make the album more palatable for the casual listener. But I think it's a case of maybe ego, and everything I write is great. So
Yeah,
I'm going to lay it down and you're going to
yeah,
get it on the album, whether you like it or not.
yeah. That's right. Bing, 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 bing. Everything I write, it's gold, man. It's gold, Jim. It's gold.
It's gold. Another album that I think is going to really surprise people is 25 years old. Enema of the State by Blink 182. You don't have to be a fan, but you'd be foolish to deny the influence that they have had on an entire generation. Dude Ranch was the predecessor to this, and I liked it a lot. Travis Barker wasn't on this album, so it does make me wonder how much he has to do with their sound. The genius behind this, however, in my opinion, was the marketing with funny videos. The music video of them just running down the street naked through the whole thing was it's silly. It makes you giggle.
Yeah, we're
I
streaking.
Yeah. And the band was all over MTV. Pop punk was the generation after ours giving the middle finger to us and grunge music. We were angry and our music reflected that. But did we do too much about it? No. So the next generation just said, you know what? We're going to take all our clothes off and run down the street and give you guys the finger.
And there is quite a bit of difference between those two albums. I hadn't listened to Dude Ranch in forever. Enema is way more pop punk. These albums are there's a vast difference here. There's a couple songs off Dude, Untitled and Apple Shampoo. You can hear them starting to explore that more pop punk side, but Enema came and yeah, they kind of enemaed the punk out of their music and went full pop punk. As for Scott versus Travis, he's not a founding member, but Travis has the biggest fan base of
Mhm.
anybody that probably will ever be in that band. In
Absolutely.
punk, drums are really hard to differentiate, right? It's fast, it's loud. There's not much room to showcase. Now, when they polish things up for Enema and onward, the songwriting was allowing for more space. With that, you can hear more character in what any musician brings. Or more importantly, they know when to just shut up and let a song breathe,
Mhm.
right? That's just a bigger musicianship. Not every song needs to be a highlight reel. If you always got to show off, you're probably an insecure twat.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
And there's more to go on with Travis too. Before joining Blink, he was in the Aquabats, and they were a ska band.
I remember the Aquabats a little bit, but I didn't realize he
I
was
think,
their drummer. Yeah.
yeah, he was. I think he was only on their second album, and
Okay.
then he got the Blink gig.
There we go. Well, speaking of angry, there was another band that put out an album 25 years ago.
Do I have to say Limp Bizkit?
Yes,
Do
you
I
do.
have to?
You
Okay, Limp
do.
Bizkit, Significant Others. So I'm going to try to put myself in a 1999 frame of mind first, and then if I'm still up for it, I'll trash it. Does that sound fair?
Trash away. But when Nookie first came out, I have to admit, I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I did too. I have to admit it. Otherwise, I'd be lying.
It still sounds really great through headphones. And
Mm.
Break Stuff is a therapy song for me. I can't tell you the amount of times I've been walking home from work after a really bad day, and this song playing through headphones has helped me resist the urge to just punch a stranger. And you know me, anybody who listens to this show, I'm not that kind of guy. I'd had some bad days, but Break Stuff is one of those release the aggression songs for me.
I agree with you on Nookie. There are a couple of songs on here that have incredibly interesting sounds, especially with headphones. They do impact there. I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
What do you think my problem is with this? And after you say Fred Durst, I'll tell you why.
It's Fred Durst.
Yeah. The limited live performances I've seen, all on YouTube-ish environs, he is comfortable being the center of attention, which being the front of a band, he does the job. But how does his voice sound like it's always on the verge of cracking? It's like Peter Brady decided to go all hard. It's motherfucking sunshiny day in here, bitches. You know, if he stays in his lower register and he gets growly, he's fine. He also comes across as a bit of a douche.
He does.
And that could be a character that he's portraying, because guess what? It gets a reaction.
No, I think he kind of was when he was younger. And anybody who has seen him recently, because they've been out playing a lot of festivals, and they would tell you, no, he definitely is 25 years older now because he's playing with a big head of white hair and a white
That
beard.
is funny.
But I think he's more self-aware. And I think he
Yeah.
knows how he was when he was younger. The funny thing is eventually Limp Bizkit music wound up in wrestling, and that's probably where it belonged all the time.
But it's too bad that he overshadows Wes Borland.
I agree, because Wes Borland's a really interesting and one of the most unique guitar players I've ever witnessed. Not even just his physical appearance, because that's cool. He's a show all in
That's the other
himself.
part. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where there's another layer of creativity to what he brings.
When you listen to Wes Borland playing, if you say, "Oh, this guy's a great guitar player," you're not getting Eddie Van Halen. You're not going to get, a shredder. What you're getting is somebody who comes up with very unique guitar parts that nobody else has really thought of. That's
Yeah, he
not,
plays with rhythm.
yeah, it's not traditional though, the music that he's playing.
No.
That's what's cool.
Also, part of my non-connection with stuff like Limp Bizkit is it's 1999. I really don't have a lot to be angry about. I'm not saying I don't get angry at things at times, but at this point in my life, I'm married a couple years, just bought a house, steady employment, blah, blah, blah. I don't really have anything to be angry about. So it was really hard for me to relate. And I bought that CD, and I remember I was doing some projects around the house, and I put it in. I'm like, oh, this is okay. And then I'm like, I'm just not angry. I don't want to hear this. I'm trying to fix stuff. I don't want to break stuff.
Well, let's talk about a happy band then.
Oh, Smash Mouth, Astro
Yes.
Lounge.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the ever-present All-Star, which I don't think that song is ever gonna go away. I wondered when I saw it on the list if this was actually going to be worth mentioning.
We have a couple of albums we're going to talk about this month that transcended time with a single hit. So we'll
Mm.
get to those later. But this had at least three top 40 alternative hits. Yeah, All Star, which then got added on to the Shrek soundtrack and found its way into the ether of forever. But
Mhm.
then The Morning Comes was all over the radio. And I Can't Get Enough of You, Baby. That's a fun song. That's still cool.
The album before this I think it had to have been their debut. Fush You Mang was a favorite of mine back in the day. So much so that I did not want to listen to Astro Lounge when it came out. I just knew I was convinced I was going to be disappointed. What I like about this new format we're doing is we get to give albums a second chance.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few songs, the ones I was afraid of, we've kind of already talked about them. They were recreating that soundscape of Walking on the Sun. So therefore kind of stripping away what made that song special and what I liked about it. And I'm sure there was some outside pressure to recreate that. But a few years cushion and listening to Greg Camp, he's the guitarist, listening to some of his solo stuff, he occasionally brings that. I mean, used kind of like where pop punk ska, but they also had this 60s revivalist sound at times.
Yeah, yeah.
And he puts that in his solo stuff from time to time. So it lends me to feel like this is an authentic stylistic choice. So I added our playlist right when we were going through the years. I added a song of his, Zombies on Parade, probably for the 2008, or I wanted to, but I couldn't because that album was not on Spotify. Well, guess what? I found out just yesterday that album's on Spotify.
Oh, nice.
And he's also got a soundtrack from a movie I don't really recall, Valley of the Sun, but there's a song on there called The Maid. You're going to hear that 60s revivalist sound come back that he had on Walking on the Sun. And these other songs from Astro Lounge. Overall, I didn't hate the album. It is fun. And kind of like the Chili Peppers, you kind of need bands around that are for fun.
Yeah. Then we had a Vertical Horizon and the album Everything You Want.
I was a huge fan of this album.
We both owned and liked this album a lot, and people who are listening are probably wondering who we're talking about. I think if there were still Time Life cassettes, that you could mail order
Yeah.
for, you definitely Everything You Want by Vertical Horizon would be in all your hits from the 90s. There'd be one of those
Yeah.
songs would be there. But hey, we get to mention our old favorites that are obscure now and then, right?
So I didn't realize you were a fan of this album.
I
So
owned it.
that
Yeah.
is kind of weird. It almost feels like an album people might be surprised that I like. Knowing some of the things I've said about other bands that are kind of in this vein, I'm pretty sure we could have a sing along on this one. This, at least that first half of the album.
So
To,
good.
to me, I still remembered every word when I was listening to it this week. I got a friend at work that I can talk music with all day, every day, all week. We don't because we would never get any work done. We were talking about 90s music just yesterday. the day before we're recording this, unsolicited, he brings this album up and how much he loved it. And I was shocked.
That's
I'm
cool.
like, I know everything you want. There were some alternative rock radio hits here. So it
Hmm.
didn't surprise me that people would know about them. But the fact that somebody said, yeah, I really love that album. And when we were covering 1999, we briefly touched on Vertical Horizon. I should have put something from this album in my five because I really connected to it. I did not listen to the second half of this album for the longest time because it got to like song 6 or 7. I could start to feel it slip a little bit, and then I just hit repeat because that the first half it's gold for me. So I finally actually got to give the second half a decent listen this week. Finding Me and Miracle, they're a few steps down from the beginning. The rest of it does tail off. They're not bad. They just don't live up to what I really liked at the beginning, which is great. You want that first part of the album to grab you.
Yeah. All right. So that's 25 years.
Let's move along to 30 years.
Let's do it. So we're going to go 30 years back. The year is 1994 and released in the month of June. Right off the bat, we have Stone Temple Pilots and the album Purple. Interstate Love Song was a classic rock era gem released smack dab in the middle of grunge. It's one of my favorite songs of the 90s. You couldn't turn on MTV for about a 6 month period as well without hearing the acoustic version from their MTV Unplugged performance of Big Empty.
Yeah, this is where I get to complain about radio again. One day we're gonna have to rant. We're gonna have a rant show based on that because early on when we were doing this show, I think you got a little annoyed with me at how much I would bring up how much radio sucks until you came back for a visit and you're like, Jesus, radio in Vermont really sucks.
When I came back in 2022, that radio station was playing the same exact playlist
Yeah,
that it was playing,
it was a time capsule.
yeah, 12 years earlier. So,
You might hear a new song every hour.
but it is like it's almost like a classic rock alternative radio station.
Yeah. And I swear to Crescent of the Salic, I can turn on at least three radio stations and still hear Interstate Love Song being played regularly since 1994. I think if I see the color purple, I hear bow down 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 down. So my
Waiting.
yeah, and I don't think the rest of the band gets enough attention.
The bass player is so good.
Yeah, and I ended up adding a couple songs to my personal marathon playlist, Vaseline and Pretty Penny. I was listening to them this week, and I'm like, damn, I used to listen to these songs over and over all the time. They got to go on the list.
Yeah, they're good songs. All right, then let's go back 35 years and get out of 1994. We're going to go back to 1989.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble in Step.
Yeah, his final album. A lot of people felt like he was finally hitting his groove and breaking commercially at this point. It's probably not my favorite album of his, but every one of his albums is part of his legacy. I think if Hendrix were alive when Stevie Ray Vaughan came around, Hendrix would have been like, "Yeah, well, here's the crown. I'm going to give it to you now."
Yeah, and Legman's, we share a love and respect of his playing. It's a tragic loss. He had so much more to give. He died so young. And
Hmm.
I'll be boring and agree with you some more. Yeah, this is not my favorite album. It's good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's good. But it kind of, and I got a feeling this is also going to be a running theme. It kind of got that 80s treatment, sound production wise. There are some issues that I have, but because blues should be gritty, it shouldn't be too polished.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, speaking of a band that wound up getting maybe too polished, uh, but still had a release in 1989 is Nirvana's Bleach. And straight away, I'm going to admit I didn't embrace Bleach. I didn't even know it was out. But back in the grunge era, it wasn't something I went back and listened to. I heard Nevermind first. And when someone played Bleach to me the first time, I was too distracted by the inferior sound to miss out on how good the songwriting was. Now, I think I might like this album more than Nevermind. Love Buzz is such a nasty, great groove, and About a Girl is just, in my opinion, classic American songwriting.
Yeah, so 1989, we're both in Newport, Vermont. So unless you have the right friends, you're probably not going to hear this.
We would have had no
Yeah,
clue. And it was a sub pop
yeah,
release. It might not have even
yeah,
made it to a record store, up in our
yeah.
area.
Yep. But our local record store, you could go in and say, "Hey, can you order this for me?" And they would order it for you, and they would get it. But you got to hear about it first,
Yeah.
right? And that's where you got to have the older brother that listens to it, or a cousin, or whatever. You got to have the right friends. And it's also probably going to sound a bit douchey to say that Bleach is better, but it is. We're never ever going to say Nevermind's garbage. That's a seminal album for many, and without it, who knows what
Yeah.
direction music would have
It's still
taken
one of my
off
favorite
into.
albums. Yeah.
And I'll say that the sound quality on this is actually really damn good. For the music that they make, it's drier, and I think it just works better. And a lot of these songs, and it could be the way, because you know how the producer can push a direction of a song. The songs on Bleach, they're a much better example of how Nirvana fits in with Soundgarden,
Yep.
Alice in Chains,
Yep. Yep.
Tad, the Melvins. Just listen to Paper Cuts. I can hear Alice in Chains all over that. Grunge is like a sludgy punk, and their sound was cleaned up too much for Nevermind. I think even the band members, kind of agree with that. I love how was recorded for Bleach. Channing's drumming, it's good. Sometimes his playing reinforces the notes being played and the rhythm. On Nevermind, it feels like the drums are driving the songs. They're pushing them, maybe even changing the writing is going to evolve. I don't get that feeling on Bleach, but he never got the chance to give us a signature drum beat like Teen Spirit either.
Mhm.
Maybe if he was given more time to grow within the band, he would have had that moment. Butch Vig made the right choices in order to propel Nirvana to the forefront with Nevermind. Not that anyone could see it coming, but an album like Bleach probably wasn't going to do it. It would be interesting to hear Nevermind in that Bleach style, just to see how differently a song like Polly would turn out.
Now, that's a really good point. It'd be really cool to hear that album if it hadn't necessarily been Butch Vig produced. And you're right about how those drum beats hit. And who knows where, Chad Channing wound up. I never really heard from him again, but he was great on this album. And, I don't want to say good enough, but good enough, I'll say it,
Yeah.
to propel them to where they needed to take that next step. So who knows? I mean, a lot of these bands in the Seattle area, they swapped members. People were in and out of bands. Keep in mind, Pearl Jam wasn't Pearl Jam. They were Mother Love Bone and they were Green River and all these other bands
Mhm.
kind of formed in and out of that scene. So it could just be a case of Chad Channing got picked up by some alt rock band that was going to go tour somewhere and just left these guys to go record their album and they picked up Dave
Yeah.
Grohl. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yep.
I should look that up. But it's also funny to think that B-52s released
Uh,
Cosmic Thing in the same year. This is when we got Love Shack and Rome. But Love Shack, come on,
yep.
Love Shack, Matt. Let's come on. You want to dance and sing back and forth at each other on the dance floor tonight? Because
Not with you.
Love Shack was the most perfectly designed song possibly ever made for it that wasn't out of the movie Grease.
Uh, so this album came to me later in life. I was not a fan of this album when it came out. It was just a little too, I don't know if joyful is the right word. It was just too poppy.
I get that. Yeah.
And mainly because I went back and listened to their older stuff, and it kind of put me in a better frame of mind. Yeah, I can see how they would evolve into this sound. The B-52s, again, they're a band about having fun. If you're going to have a party and you're going to want a band like the B-52s to play at it,
Yeah. They're a great, great fun
right?
band.
You're not going to have Creed. You're going to
No.
have the B-52s.
Well, what about 1989, Mr. Big and their album Mr. Big? I don't disrespect them, but this was, I think, definitely your thing.
Yeah, it was. And this is one of the reasons why, B-52s didn't get much airplay, is because hair metal is still a big part of my life, right? A lot of things outside of it, I would hear it from Mark playing, my older brother. You, our bigger circle of friends, I would hear stuff like this. But it's not what I loved. And I would always, kind of, I don't know if gatekeeping is the right word, but I was always very protective
You were
of,
gatekeeping. You were
yeah,
definitely
yeah. I was
gatekeeping.
kind of like, defending. Yeah, I was gatekeeping.
Fair
I was
enough.
defending it. Yeah. I stopped beating around the bush, Matt. Yeah, I'll defend hair metal. But yeah, this was my thing. This is prime time for me loving Billy Sheehan. Yeah, it's hair. I don't know what else you're gonna call it. When Addicted to That Rush starts, Billy Sheehan, Paul Gilbert kick in. Son of a bitch, man. Billy Sheehan was paired with Steve Vai for the David Lee Roth solo albums, the first two.
Yes.
And it's kind of what those two could have done if Steve Vai wasn't so quirky.
Okay. Yeah, I get that.
I know you got a problem with all the effects Billy Sheehan uses. I'm not a fan of it either because, yeah, it can kind of bury his sound because it takes away that bottom end. It does help cut through the mix, but Billy Sheehan, I'm a big fan of his playing. Pat Torpey, rest in peace. His drumming just fit the songs. Eric Martin, he's got a great voice. Hey, honorable mentions are not dead in the new format,
No.
right? Check out the Eric Martin band. He has stuff before Mr. Big. He's got this hitch in his voice, like Caleb Followell of Kings of Leon, that he can't help but be but himself. He's just going to come off as a rock and roll singer. Everything just fits really well in this album
Yeah, he's a great rock
and
and roll
lean into it
singer.
the next album. Yeah, he
Yeah,
is a great rock singer.
yeah, he's a great rock singer. So we neither one of us put anything in the notes for this. We just put Prince, Batman, and that's
We
it.
don't need to.
No, we don't. I did go back and listen to the entire album last
I did
week.
too. God damn, it's good.
It's so good. It was so much fun. I think that Tim Burton was really wise to use Prince as kind of the party man music. I think there's a song called Party Man
Yep.
on the soundtrack, and then bring in Danny Elfman to do the very serious Batman themes within.
Mm-hmm.
We actually spoke recently about how when we went and saw the Batman movie, I think it was the last show actually.
Yeah, it
Because I was like,
was.
yeah, it was 30, whatever, 35 years
Happy
ago.
little accidents.
Yeah, we went and saw Batman. But yeah, we listened to this album quite a bit. And this is one of those albums as well that has songs on it that have little samples of the characters from the Batman movie talking during the songs. And it's cool. I can take it.
Yeah, because Prince does something that a lot of soundtracks don't do. He kind of tells the story of the movie within the songs. The songs are about the movie, they're about the characters in the movie.
Yes, yes. When we messaged each other this past week to say we'd both listen to it, I brought up Arms of Orion, and I get it. You didn't like it,
No.
but I still think it's a pretty song. When I first heard the voice of so Arms of Orion is a duet. And when I first heard the voice of the woman singing with Prince on this,
Sheena Easton.
yeah, I had to go look it up. And I was like, that's just so pretty. Like her voice is just really pretty on the song,
Mm-hmm.
whether you like the song or not. But yeah, I mean, it was not like one of those slow jams that you're waiting to make out with a girl with because it's off the Batman soundtrack. What are you going to do? Hey, you want to put on the Batman soundtrack?
And one of the things you brought up in our chat, because I was like, this album is just delightfully strange and
It is.
weird,
Yeah.
and chaotic. And you brought up a point to me that it is almost like he is taking on the persona of the Joker as he's recording this album, because it is pretty nut bar.
That's a great observation. I think you might be right there.
You made it. I'm just repeating with the genius of Jim Bowen.
Oh, did I say the Joker thing? I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, hey. I might have had a few beers before I messaged you about that. But speaking about Arms of Orion and songs you want to try to make out with a girl to in 1989. Well, you see my background. Nobody else can see it, but behind
Yeah, we do
me,
this over Zoom, and Jim's been tormenting me this whole time with this picture.
I have the Michael Bolton Soul Provider album cover behind me. And it's taken me 35 years to admit that I owned this. I was still getting caught up in some 80s cheese at this point. There's no doubt about that.
Hey, Jim, I was still getting caught up in 80s hair bands
That's
in
fine.
89, right?
Some of that stuff still stands up though. This I
Well, so
listen.
does some of this 80s cheese stuff too. I'm trying to defend you.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Before any of the audience members start throwing Rotten Tomatoes and eggs at us. I listened to it this week. Michael Bolton's Soul Provider. And the title song was stuck in my head for like 3 days afterwards. But the song, How Can We Be Lovers, But We Can't Be Friends? I have
Boy.
a friend, I remember going over to his house and you know, he passed away young. And I think that's why I have a special memory to this song. He loved this album. And I went over to his house one time and he was like, "Oh, he knew I like music. I found this song and you've got to listen to this and put this on." No, I'd already owned the tape at this point, but you know, he put on How Can We Be Lovers, But We Can't Be Friends. And it's one of those songs that kind of has that good memory. But I'll take my licks for this. I loved it at the time. It was something that yeah, I like to sing in the car. Okay. And
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
sing to
Hey,
this.
there you go. You spit it out. And damn it, you put up the Iron Dome. Now I can't say anything bad about this song because I'm going to be crashing on a positive memory. Oh my God. But I will anyway. You know how some songs can be delightfully cheesy? So,
Yeah.
so bad it's good kind of thing. Not so with Sir Michael Bolton. You know, he's got a great voice, right? There's no saying he can't sing, right? There's no lie. You can't deny that. There are some sound choices, again, happening in the 80s. I wasn't a fan of. I'm also not going to say that I didn't listen to certain songs on purpose back in the day. Georgia on My Mind, was one that I would play because it's Georgia on My Mind. It's a great song. But in a fresh listen this week, I'm like, oh, this is not good. This is not holding up.
It's just so over the top. It is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is from Munda Cheese. It's so it's so it's like he felt the weight of the moment unnecessarily. It's a song. Yeah, it's Georgia on My Mind. It's a classic. Ray Charles, whatever. But you don't have to give it that much weight, right? He was almost singing in reverence of Ray Charles.
I hear that. Yeah.
But here's the thing, Michael. You're never going to top Ray Charles. Just sing the damn song.
Yeah, just do it your way.
Yeah. I feel like I'm being too negative. I got to pull it back because, again, you told that nice, heartwarming, touching story. And now people are going to be mad at me. Uh, but, there's fun in poking the bear. But at the same time, I don't want to come off as a prick all the time. I've always been kind of curious about his older recordings. And I had always heard about this band, Blackjack. And the reason why I was curious is because the guitarist in that band was Buse Kulick, who was in the 80s version of Kiss. Yes, everybody should
Yeah.
remember I'm a Kiss fan. So he was around for the Animalize tour, the album Asylum. He was with them till the end. And Blackjack's actually really good. I mean, if you like Eddie Money kind of rock, check out Blackjack. This is the music that Michael Bolton should have just kept doing. But even, Eddie Money, his last album, they were kind of starting to go down this road as well. There was some cheese.
Oh yeah, there was definitely another album that, speaking of rock, but not Eddie Money kind of rock. Faith No
No.
More. No, Faith No More, the real thing. I have nothing but love for this album. I probably still listen to it at least once a year. And when we created the original Jam Yearbook playlist, I added Falling to Pieces. This album was really out of place with everything else I was listening to. I'm going to go from Michael Bolton to Faith No More in 1989.
And you
But
did, yes.
I did, but it's lasted the longest probably as something I would go back to.
Yeah, imagine you're going to go from Prince Batman to Michael Bolton to Faith No More. You're going to get music whiplash, that's for sure. This is a classic. It's an amazing feat that this album took off the way it did. I still don't quite understand how this got the traction. You needed to forget everything you thought you knew about song format. The map we talk about and rhythms and chord structures that you're always used to hearing. Throw it away. And Mike Patton, he vocalizes. He does not just sing. I almost didn't listen to this to prep because I'm like, I do not need a fresh listen to this album. I know it, but I couldn't resist myself. I listen to it like you at least once a year.
Mhm.
It's just a great goddamn album. So Red Hot Chili Peppers should pay attention because there's 10 songs on this album and every one of them kicks ass. It's impossible to pick a favorite because each song that comes on makes me rethink my choice. Yeah, I mean, if you don't make a bloated album, you can knock an album out of the park.
Yeah, you can. Okay, so then we had Cher's Heart of Stone. That was the name of the album.
So you put it on the list. I'm thinking, is Jim trying to play on my ability to obsess and thinking I got to be a completist and I got to listen to every damn album on this thing? Yeah, Jim, you won. You won. Part way. I did listen to this album. Part way through, I had to tap out. It got too much for me. Cher, love Cher for what she's done, for the history of music. Beautiful, incredibly strong voice, but the backing vocals on this, it is like a sea of harpies, shrews, whatever annoying sounds. It was an assault on my ears. I feel like I have a lawsuit. It was just too much. I felt like I was being yelled at by really high-pitched voices.
This album was just so big, though. Suddenly, our dads had an interest in music videos.
And the Navy.
Yeah, that was the music video. If I could turn back time, where Cher came out on the aircraft carrier
Yep.
and was wearing a very see-through outfit. I think it can be
Revealing.
argued, revealing. Yeah, revealing. I think it could be argued that Cher didn't peak in the 60s as much as this also wasn't a renaissance. She peaked in the 80s with music and film. I think the Shoop Shoop song had come out before this, and that was a big hit for her. And then this album came along. This was more than 20 years after I Got You, Babe made her iconic with Sonny Bono. And she
Yep.
was everywhere with that album at that time. She got
Well, on the
herself
Sonny and Cher show.
yeah, television programs and such. But I think that if I could turn back time, as repetitive as that chorus is, even with the key change and it just keeps going, it is what landed her as a complete icon for decades to come.
So yeah, I'll kind of agree with you with the peaking, but disagree with you at the same time because I think she had two separate and possibly equal peaks because she reinvented herself.
She's probably somebody who had two completely different music careers.
Yes, two
Yeah.
different fan bases, everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Chris Isaak, Heart Shaped World. This album was big. It was huge, but it was not huge in 1989. It sat on the shelf for 2 years before anybody took notice. There was an instrumental clip of Wicked Game that plays during David Lynch's Blue Velvet. That movie came out in 1991. A radio station manager in Atlanta found the full track and put it in constant rotation for 2 weeks after he'd watched the movie. The album went from aiming towards the cheap bin in Ames, to selling over 4 million copies.
This is a pretty amazing story. If it wasn't for my brother Mark, I never probably would have even given this album a listen when it came out, but I was drawn to it because I was starting to hear of the ties with Roy Orbison. You could hear that influence. And I'm like, I don't really hear it, aside from being a crooner. But it kind of finally hit me this week with Diddley Daddy, the last song on the track, where that Roy Orbison connection kind of finally stuck with me.
A hit.
And
Yeah.
it's amazing how this, like you just told the story, that how this album was almost going in the cheap bin. And then, a few years later, he had a show on Showtime or something, the Chris Isaak show.
Yeah.
His whole career turned around thanks to that DJ.
Okay, so we go back 40 years, and I'm just going to say both these albums at once.
Go for it.
Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, and Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain.
Okay, everybody, stop groaning. I'm not going to keep going on and on about Purple Rain. I recognize that I talk about this album frequently, so bear with me. Sorry, I still love it. It's a Desert Island album for me. Purple Rain, one of my favorite songs of all time. Sue me, I'm saying it again. I'll try to step back from that Prince conversation because if you don't know, I love this album. Well, you haven't been listening because this is one of my favorite albums of all time.
When you think about the 80s and you say to somebody, what are the greatest albums of the 80s? Or, what music makes you think of the 80s? Surely you're going to get Thriller, Michael Jackson. You're going to get Madonna. There might be some anomalies out with that people have for personal preferences, but you're also going to get Born in the USA and Purple Rain. They're so iconic.
So this is 1984, right? Thriller's 1982. Doesn't that seem like a lifetime in between those two albums coming out?
Yeah.
Where we were in our lives and just how music had evolved. And it's not only weird that the albums came out in the same month and they're so huge, but even the lead singles, Dancing in the Dark and When Doves Cry, came out in May, a reasonable month. Pay attention, Judas Priest, before the album comes out. And I wonder if, because there is a disconnect, it's hard for me to reconcile that these albums were out at the same time because I kind of remember them when they hit. And I wonder if Prince got hot and then cooled off, especially once the movie left the theaters. I remember there being a narrative around Born in the USA when it came out. Like it was almost heralded as a comeback of sorts. And I kind of got to thinking about that because yeah, in 1982 he had Nebraska without the E Street Band, and that's kind of his singer-songwriter album.
Mhm.
River was in 1980. So you're talking 4 years. I mean, I just brought up how it seems like a canyon in between Thriller and Born in the USA and Purple Rain. I mean, this is even more between the what he was doing on the river and Born in the USA. 4 years is it's a long time. And many of his songs center around hardship. What's wrong with my life? Getting older, regrets,
Relationship struggles.
relationship struggles. And that is part of my problem with connecting with Bruce Springsteen. I
Mhm.
didn't share those struggles. I'm 16 or whatever. What do I know about not being able to keep a job or whatever
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. I'm going to simply say that I think that the one thing that pushed Born in the USA in 1984 was nationalism because of the presidential election that was going on at the time. And I knew people who didn't even understand that Born in the USA was kind of an anti war song. I didn't really know that myself at the time, but they thought it
No.
was kind of an American anthem. They thought it was about,
Yeah.
raising your fist and pumping it in the air and being so proud of being born in the USA.
Yeah. Pay attention to those lyrics beyond the anthemic bum, 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 bum,
Yeah.
right? That's what gets people to sing along to. Man, you dig into these lyrics, you're like, oh shit, that's heavy.
So earlier in the show, I talked about bands that were one hit wonders. And here is a band we're going to bring up. Now we're going back 45 years to 1979. The album is The Knack, Get the Knack. And definitely the big song from them was My Sharona. I gave this album a listen before we did the show. And there were a couple of songs that kind of gave me the Strokes vibes. Frustrated, I remember Jim Wentworth telling me, go listen to, I like that album, but listen to the song Frustrated. He must have known I was a teenager at the time, and that's what I needed to go listen to. The last song on the album, it stood out for me it more than the other ones that are obvious that we all know.
Yeah, they could have just named that song Blue Balls.
Yeah, they should have.
We talk about fatigue all the time with songs. My Sharona is a fatigue song, and it even got a second life. Oh my God, 1994, Reality Bites. So there's another album
Yes.
anniversary we could have had. This thing would have a dual anniversary. It's more than a solid album. And it gets past the fatigue. For me, though, the gem is That's What the Little Girls Do. There are some testosterone driven lyrics that may not have survived the Me Too movement. Besides the song title, here's a little gem from My Sharona. Never gonna stop, give it up, such a dirty mind. I always get it up for the touch of a younger kind. And then from Good Girls Don't,
Yeah.
I had sung along with like the chorus of this song many times, never really the verses because again, not a lyric guy, mostly. And it's a teenage sadness everyone has got to taste, an in between age madness that you can't erase till she's sitting on your face. There you go. Right there. And that got on the radio.
Wow, that's crazy. But the Cars, Candio, 1979. Great album cover, really, if you want to talk about
Yeah.
risque and how
Yeah.
things look. But it was I put this album on this week thinking I didn't know anything off of it. And I saw the title of the first track, Let's Go, and hit play, and I knew every word to the song right away.
Yeah.
This album is so cool. It's cool. It's probably not as iconic as all of their albums. Their debut album is so good, but this was not a sophomore slump for them.
No, and to me, it's an iconic album. I mean, it's still kind of got some new age edge to it. It's great when bands have two singers because it kind of keeps things fresh from time, as it goes throughout the album. And their voices are surprisingly similar. I know OK Six voice is kind of stilted and a little bit abrupt at times, but they are still fairly similar. But the biggest thing for me with the Cars, and I never really noticed this until I started playing in the songs in a band. These songs are very, when you just listen to them, you think they're kind of up tempo until you start playing them. And you're like, God dang it, these things just plod along. How is anybody going to dance to these things?
Yeah.
If they sped them up, they'd be like a minute and a half. They'd be punk songs.
And then classic rock band, kind of Jeff Lynne fronted ELO Discovery came out. The song Don't Bring Me Down. I was 7 years old when this album came out. And up until this point, I was listening to either whatever music my parents had or whatever my older brother was listening to. I heard Don't Bring Me Down in the back seat of my parents' car one day when we were going from A to B, one place to the other. And remembering it being the first time I was consciously deciding that I needed to find out what this song was so I could listen to it
Oh,
more.
same here. I remember hearing the song. I don't know if it was like a bowling alley, skating rink. And I remember we were leaving. My parents were like, hey, come on, we gotta go, we gotta go. And I'm just like, no, I want to hear the rest of the song. I stayed until
Yeah.
the song was done. Because I'm like, no, this, you know, again, I'm what, 8? If you're 7, I'm like, no, this song is kicking my ass right now. I love it so much. But when this album came up in my list of what I got to listen to this week, or at least kind of form an opinion about, I got it completely mixed up. I was expecting Out of the Blue, and I got Discovery, which is fine. I'm an ELO fan. Love Jeff Lynne's voice. He's one of my favorite voices of all time. But there are a couple strong disco tracks on this one.
Yeah, there
And
are.
it's always made Discovery a little hard to navigate. I could give a rat's ass about the first half of this record. Those two disco tracks and Horace Wimp, they're awful. I hate to say it because I am an ELO fan. They're awful. But from Midnight Blue on, that's all I need. Those are some, I think it's like 4 songs at that point. But I remember Don't Bring Me Down. That's a classic. And then keeping with the classic, because 45, now we're at 50 years, it's going to be classic. It doesn't matter if it's rock, punk, funk, whatever. It's classic. 1974, we got Elton John's Caribou.
He's had a lot of widely successful songs in his career, songs that transcended. I think Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me has to be in the top three of his greatest songs.
Love that song. You're right. That is a classic. But therein lies my issue with Elton. He's got some songs I like a bunch, even love, but whole albums are tough. The Bitch is Back. That's a no-fly zone for me. Can't stand that song. It's a classic. It still gets played on the radio. People love it. Blah blah blah. I can't take it. So I had to skip that song if I was going to give this album a fair shot. But then I got this, was it Solar Prestige Agamon? I couldn't even tell what he was singing, and I don't care if it's not English as long as the music is captivating. I tapped out. It felt like the whole thing, it felt like a musical to me. And we know my challenges with musicals. And I'm not alone. I Googled reviews of Caribou, older reviews. Some of the newer reviews are a little bit more forgiving. I think they lean into the legendary feel that Elton John is, but some of the early reviews, they're kind of right on. This is not a good album.
But a man you definitely had to have understood every single syllable of every
Because he
single
stressed
song.
them.
Yes, it was John Denver and his album Back Home Again. This is the John Denver album I probably heard the most as a kid in the 70s. Back Home Again, was always a song. Hey, it's good to be back home again. It's a running theme when you're traveling and you're coming home.
Hmm.
And then Thank God I'm a Country Boy
Great
is
song.
one of the best stomp and clap songs of all time. And throw in Annie's song to the mix. And it's, to me, it's almost a greatest hits collection.
Well, there are only two songs I needed from John Denver this time around. And I'll say three. You hit on all three of them. They're good.
Okay.
Um, this, I guess I've never listened to a whole John Denver album before. I think it's always just been the hits because he's got some songs that are endearing to me. But as a whole album, it's so stiff that I had to break it down into chunks to really enjoy it. Let's put it that way.
And I would say if you want, it's like we talk about cheesy ballads. Come on, we were on Michael Bolton at the beginning of this episode,
Yeah.
and if I'm going to actually appear kind of respectful singing a ballad and a love song, Annie's song is way better to
Oh,
go
hell yeah.
and belt it out to than Soul Provider by Michael Bolton.
Oh my God. The only thing worse than the studio version of Soul Provider would be a karaoke version of Soul Provider.
I can do that. I can do
Oh,
that.
as Jim says, hold my beer.
Yes, exactly. And then hold my beer because Matt, we are going to have to talk about this is the last album we're going to go through. 50 years ago, Grateful Dead from the Mars
You're
Hotel.
welcome.
We've tried. We've tried. We've tried. We've tried. We've tried. We both have friends who have loved and lived the dead. The strength of getting it and enjoying the Grateful Dead's music is the same polar opposite for not getting
Yes.
it and
There's no middle
enjoying
ground
it.
here.
No. As a music history show, I think there are some interesting tidbits about this album. First, it was that when they recorded it, they actually didn't enjoy the album because they didn't feel it captured their live sound correctly or the essence of the jam. I can understand that.
Yeah.
No problem. The second tidbit is that they had this wall of sound that they went on tour with in the period of 1974. They actually started with this album first and using the wall of sound and experimenting with it. The only thing cool about the wall of sound, the bass player, every single one of his strings was connected to a different amplifier.
No way.
Yes.
How the hell did
Yeah.
they do that?
They actually had every single
They
one
would
of his
have to
strings.
isolate every pole off a pickup.
That's what they did. They isolated
Holy
every pull off the
shit.
pickup
That's actually
so
kind
that
of
when he was
impressive.
playing, it is. The theory behind the wall of sound is absolutely phenomenal. The practicality of it was too difficult for them to take out live on
Yeah.
tour. It wound up being too expensive for them to carry around and take everywhere they were going.
You kind of blew my mind right there with that little technical. I didn't really know that they would put that much thought into it. It is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of blown away by that. Hold on. I'm having a moment because I'm fucking the technician in me is going through my head going, how the fuck would you do that? So wall of sound aside, you kind of blew my mind there. Mars Hotel, it's got some good bookends. Can't deny US Blues, Ship of Fools. They frame this album in nicely. But there's a whole painting that's supposed to be in that frame that's missing for me, except this little spot in the middle where Unbroken Chain is, because there are some interesting sonic moments in that song. It finally dawned on me, or maybe I finally had the courage to say it. My main gripe may be that I don't think Jerry's a good singer at all. And you know what?
I
For everybody who's going to start railing on me, there are people out there openly, and loudly, proudly saying that the Beatles suck. So if people can say the Beatles suck, I can say that the Grateful Dead suck, or certain aspects of them suck. I'm
but
sorry.
you're
I
not.
know people take music personally and passionately, especially when somebody pokes the bear at one of their favorites. Oh, you just don't understand it. No, I understand it. It's not for me.
Yeah, that's fine. You are not saying that they suck the same way that people say it. People who say that about the Beatles just want to cut you off and not listen to anything.
It's because they're tired of hearing about the Beatles.
A quick story of the reason why I could never be a Dead fan. I tried to like the Grateful Dead. I tried really hard. I played Uncle John's band. I played Franklin's Tower in some bands when I was in college. Had a great time playing those songs. I always got a kick out of Casey Jones and Scarlet Begonia, and there are songs that touch a gray. Even that later in their career, that song kind of hooked me in a little bit to them.
Yeah,
Didn't
it's
make
not
me
a
a
bad
huge
song.
fan. No, it's not a bad song. But I think it was probably 1994, 1995. I went to Burlington, Vermont to hang out with some friends for the night. We went out, went to the bars, came back to this guy's place where we were all staying and had a little, I will quote unquote, brain candy before we all went to bed. So I was the guy on the couch. Other roommates were away that night. My other friends got beds and bedrooms, and I took the couch. The guy who owned the place had a bedroom just off of the living room. And when he went to bed, he put on Terrapin Station on vinyl, one side of it, and let it play over and over and over again all night. And I think it was one of those,
Hitchcock,
we
make
were
it
young,
stop.
back when you would sleep for 8 to 10 hours. And I went to bed and I was, feeling fine and my brain was in a good place and happy. And for the first probably 2 to 4 plays of that half of Terrapin Station, I was like, hey, this is cool. I'm digging this. I'm getting into this. I had to have heard it at least 25 to 40 times that night. And after probably
Oh,
about 10 to
oh.
15 plays and hearing the arm get up off the record and go back over and drop back
The
down
only
and start it
solace of the
over
evening.
again, I was just lying there on the couch because I would start to doze off, but then you would dream the music. They would come into your head, like what was going on, and you're like, I can't escape this album, these songs, everything that's happening. So my friends who love the Grateful Dead, much respect to you and whatever. It's your thing. I made an effort. Yeah, I don't hear what you hear. I can have a good time with some of it, but fans like the guy that I spent the night at his place that night, those
Oh,
people are the exact reason why I have a hard time coming on the show. But I will say this. My buddy had a lovely, lovely dog named Lucy, and the dog was named after the song Loosely Loosely off the album. So I've got a strong sentimental place in my heart for that song. End of story. I always wrap it around with something
I
good.
love that story. That's an awesome story.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
It's time for
Yeah.
us to finish
Sorry, Dead
because
fans, not for us.
yeah. We were nice to the album. We were
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. It's just, hey, we know musical opinions are personal. If people are allowed to say something I like sucks, that's going to be my out for anything now. People saying the Beatles suck. So, hey, I can say whatever.
Hey, I talked about liking Michael Bolton at the start of this episode, so I have no ground to stand on telling anybody else what to listen to at any point
Yeah,
in their
you have
life.
no legs. No legs.
No, I don't.
But hey, hopefully we're going to wrap this up. Tune in next time. Hey, we're going to cover the album anniversaries of July. And you're going to love it.
It's going to be
because we're going to love it.
we're going to love some of it, and we're probably not going to love all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But
How's that for confidence?
We will put up some albums on the Facebook page, and you can decide which albums you think were the best that are celebrating anniversaries in July. Did not say it, but the audience poll that we ran before this episode, they chose Purple Rain. And I didn't bring it up because I didn't want Matt to throw his arms in the air and celebrate.
That's
like
exactly
he's doing
what I'm doing right now. Touchdown, motherfuckers.
Yeah, yes,
that's right. Hey,
that's what they chose.
I'm glad everybody showed that respect because I love it.
All right. Well, Matt, say goodnight to everybody.
Good night, everybody. We will see you here next time on the Jam Yearbook.
We will. Peace, love, and podcast.